Welcome to Abundance. You guessed it, a podcast dedicated to all things surrounding dance. I am Kristen.
And I am Hannah, and we are two best friends who are brought together by this art form.
Please join us in 5, 6, 7, 8.
Hello, and we are back. We have the lovely Jess Spinner with us today, and we're super excited to learn more about her and her career and everything that she does now.
Yes, we're very excited to have Jess Spinner with us today. Jess actually reached out to us via our Instagram at Abundance Podcast, and we're so glad that you did, because part of what we've really hoped to gain from this podcast is not only to utilize our pre-existing connections, but to build new ones and broaden our network. So thank you again, Jess, for reaching out and taking the time to speak with us today. And if anyone else is out there who's listening and you think you'd be a good fit, also don't hesitate to reach out to us as well. So I did a little deep diving because other than what I saw on your social media and your website, I just wanted to get a little background of who you are. So would you just start out by giving us a little brief introduction about yourself and just your connection to dance?
Sure. So when I started dancing, I was a performer as a little person. I was one of those little kids who really liked people watching me do things and dance around and sing and perform. I started seeing Broadway shows when I was 5. And so I really was anytime there was a kid on stage, I was like, oh my gosh, I want that to be me. But I started dancing at a little combo studio where we did an hour and a half of ballet, tap, and jazz combined. And I was there until I was about 12. And at that point, my teacher at this smaller studio that obviously wasn't super professional was like, I think you need to go somewhere else, go someplace better. To which I'm very grateful, because I think there's a lot of times when that does not happen, and it should. So then I started at the Iglevsky Ballet School, or it was called American Theater Dance Workshop, connected to the Iglevsky Ballet. And that's where it got much more serious in dance. And that's when I started thinking professional track thoughts. And I, was definitely behind, but kind of tried to do my best to catch up and started going to summer intensives every year. And as I'm sure you girls know, that's really that's when you really see what's out there if you're not already at a super pre-professional school. And so it was kind of like a good introduction to the competition. Being from New York, I also had to do all of my summer intensive auditions at the School of American Ballet, or most of them anyway. So that was another whoa moment when I started going there for auditions and seeing all the incredible dancers in New York. From there, I was not ready technically, probably having started late and things like that, to go straight to a company. So I went to Butler University and studied dance and arts administration there. From Butler, I went and danced with the Louisville Ballet. And then after Louisville, I moved to Boston and started freelancing in Boston for a number of years. And then I was injured and burnt out and had not been in a good place with body image or relationship to food. And so the struggle just became too much at that point. And I just stopped dancing and decided it was time to move on. After that, I kind of did a bunch of different things, as dancers do when they stop pursuing dance in that way. And you're trying to figure it out. Ultimately, I ended up deciding to get my health coaching certification through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And then in 2015, I started The Whole Dancer, where I provide health, nutrition, and lifestyle coaching for aspiring and professional dancers, and even a handful of serious adult ballet students, which is cool. It's a nice mix of different people and different lifestyles and things like that. So keeps things interesting.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Sure.
Yes, very cool to hear about. I'm also curious, so where along your journey did you become friends with Tanya Trombley? As you know, she was just on our podcast not too long ago.
Yeah.
And we presume you learned about her through us. So yeah, we're just curious about that.
Learn about us through her.
Yes, I learned about.
That's what I mean. Yes. Thank you, Kristen.
Yes, I learned about you guys through Tanya. She and I connected. She started Bulletproof Ballerina around 2015 as well. So, there was really not a lot of that kind of dancer support service with a strong web presence at that time. And so just in kind of like scoping out who else was out there doing this kind of thing, I came across her website, and then we got in touch and ended up collaborating. Probably our first collaboration was in 2017, where she provided the cross-training component of my online course, the Dancer's Best Body Program. And then we've stayed in touch and done different things over the years. We even met in person when she was performing in Cambridge. When I was living in Boston, we got together. And so, yeah, she's been a really great support and ongoing contact for me in this, for me in my afterlife from professional dance. But, obviously she's juggling all the things.
That's awesome. It's really great to build those kinds of connections. And I personally am a big fan of collaborations. That's what Hannah and I do. We kind of collaborate on this podcast, and just, it's wonderful to be able to do that with other artists. And
yes, same page. I think that collaboration is so important. And I think that when it comes to dancer support services, especially like I said, when she and I started what we're doing, there was not a lot out there, but it has grown a lot in the last few years, especially. And so much more than viewing any of these people as competition, I'm just like, oh, this is great. You're doing this thing in a similar way or something different. And it could be something that one of my clients or another dancer could really use and find value in. And I also always say that, everyone's approach is different. So even if I do something similar to someone else, we may approach it in very different ways, or we may connect to our clients in very different ways. And so I think it's so important to collaborate so that dancers can be aware of all the different people who are out there who might be able to help them, so that they can see, oh, I really do feel connected more to this person or this person, and gain the greatest value and growth from whomever they work with.
absolutely. And I remember Tanya was discussing with us a little bit about how she is pulled from her own personal experiences to help out her clients, and every person's experiences are different. So you can each draw from your own experiences and offer unique services in that way. But also when you come together, then that brings together two different life experiences and kind of can help people in different ways. Yeah. And fill in certain gaps that one person might be missing, but the other person can kind of assist with.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I even think that us meeting you now, that's a way that we kind of have collaborated a little bit, because we're learning about what you have to offer too. So it's just all really exciting and good to network, if you will.
100%.
I also was curious, did you want to become a health coach during your whole time growing up, or is this something that you kind of developed after you danced yourself?
So I became very interested in, it started as diets around 13, when I got my first body related feedback that I took to heart and felt that I needed to lose weight. So I started exploring food from a diet perspective at that time. And over the years, it evolved into interest in nutrition and, these things. Unfortunately, nutrition and dieting have this very interconnected relationship that's not a good thing. It doesn't serve people. We need to remove the diet component of any sort of nutrition information and study and things like that. But for me, they were so very interconnected for a very long time. And then even as I was getting towards the end of my dance journey, it was all stuff I continued to be interested in, mostly from the goal of trying to change myself physically. This was where that motivation was coming from. When I stopped dancing and started doing more yoga and, made friends in other realms of fitness, the yoga especially was very powerful for me, because working out without a mirror and having really great yoga teachers who were talking about, feeling your strength from inside and not being concerned with how things might look. You know, it's like very counter to all the things that we are told to focus on in dance. Like, oh, how does this thing look? How should you be changing yourself in order to make this thing look better? It's like, you know, really great yoga teachers. It's quite the opposite. And so I finally started to connect to myself in a different way. And that did start to translate into my relationship to food and my body. When I started to look at different paths in nutrition, I was quite turned off by a little bit more traditional path, because I just knew that it wasn't just about the food. It wasn't just about knowing how many calories or macros might work best for someone based on, you know, this thing that they're doing, but it really is about how they cultivate community and relationships, and what their relationship to movement is, and how they feel in their body, and what balance looks like in their lives. So I just knew there was so much more to it than just food, which is where my interest in taking a less traditional approach to nutrition came from. And that's what drew me to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, because it is a holistic, whole person consideration of what's going to allow you to find balance with food and yourself. And so it's a bit of a winding path to get there, I would say, but ultimately I'm really happy where I've ended up.
Cool. Yeah. And how many clients do you have right now?
It varies. One-on-one, I have about 20. And partly it's like my schedule doesn't allow much more than that at this point, because I have a young daughter. But then I do 2 or 3 times a year, I do group coaching as well, which allows me to take on a larger number of clients, and also allows dancers to work with me at what's generally a more affordable price point.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Very cool.
Yeah. Now, these one-on-one sessions and these group sessions you're speaking about, Jess, do you offer these via Zoom? Are they all taking place in person? How does that kind of work?
It's all via the Zoom, all on the Zoom. Yeah. Yeah, before I would do like a mix, before Zoom was like the one that everyone was using, I would do a mix. Sometimes I would see clients over FaceTime. I have a couple of clients who I do see still over FaceTime, but even like we'd use old school Skype, but now pretty much all on Zoom.
That's really wonderful that you were, I guess, kind of ahead of things in that sense. Obviously, Zoom has been used for plenty of other things over the years, but I feel like the dance world, at least, hasn't really experienced Zoom all that much until COVID hit. So that's pretty cool that you were kind of ahead of the game in that sense.
One of the first things I did too, when I launched The Whole Dancer, was I had an online workshop. So in 2015, when like it really wasn't something that was happening very much. And I think it was just really valuable for dancers to have an opportunity to attend something like that. It was free. I do a lot of free workshops, but like to have that opportunity to attend something like that from anywhere, and, you know, gain some value and information that they might otherwise have missed out on.
Yeah, no, and it definitely makes things more accessible. So that way your clientele isn't just focusing on where you happen to be living, but you can help dancers.
Right. Yeah.
Great. Well, I'm a little bit curious about going back to, you mentioned that you went to Butler, which I'm a bit familiar with Butler. I believe Hannah did as well, but I auditioned there at the time when I was looking for strong ballet programs for college. And so what made you choose this route? Were there any particular deciding factors, like things of the stability of having a degree, maybe influence from your parents, or not feeling like you were ready to pursue a professional career yet? What kind of made you choose the college path?
The main thing was, I was going to say the main thing was that I wasn't ready for a career, but really the main thing was that my mom was like, you have to go to college. She was like, you can keep dancing, but you have to go to college. So that was the main deciding factor there. I got a really good vibe at Butler, and it did quickly become like my first choice after we traveled all around for auditions and things like that. My mom liked that it was like very easily combined with a degree that was not dance, where like I did the dance and arts administration track. So, you know, there were all these business classes, and to her as a non-dancer, that was like necessary non-dance education that I was getting there as well. And so looking back, am very aware that I also was not ready to go straight to a company at that point. It's possible, had I auditioned, I might have gotten into some sort of trainee thing or whatever. But from many perspectives, emotional maturity, technical ability, all of that was not where it probably needed to be to get into and to like maintain a company position at that point.
I think that's very important, though, what you mentioned about kind of that like emotional intelligence and maturity, because that's obviously a large component of being a dancer. And Hannah and I, at least, are big advocates for college dance programs and dancers pursuing that route. Not to say not pursuing college is a bad thing, but we just are advocates for college dance programs, and that I do really believe it allows for a lot of growth and maturity just as an overall person, besides the technical and artistic components of your training that do benefit then down the road, like a professional career.
Yeah, definitely. I remember like starting out in Louisville and just kind of thinking, because, you know, those of us starting out were a range of ages, and some dancers were like 17 or 18. And I was just thinking like, oh my gosh, I would feel so much more stressed and anxious in this company environment if I was here at that age. Like, I would really not be able to handle it. And, you know, you have a lot of experiences and just the time to grow and mature when you're in college. And while starting in a company at 22 is still young, it does, it has given you that time to develop a little bit further. And I do think it makes a difference.
Yeah, and those transferable skills that you do learn in college or in a specific, you know, college dance program environment, I feel like you can take anywhere you go, whether that be a company or any part of life, you know, prior to college. So it's just, yeah, as Kristen said, like, we're big advocates of it. Sounds like you are too, Jess.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a special time, I feel like, in all of our lives in college. And it really does prepare you for those bigger things that come your way. And as you said, I don't think I could do a big company at like 17 or 18, you know. I would be like, this is too much. I want to go back home, you know.
Right. And I'll say too, for college dancers, something that I hear so often from, you know, college seniors as they're getting ready to audition or as they're getting ready to transition into company is that they then will often have all of this self-doubt around the fact that they're the older ones starting out. But that's a strength. You have to look at it as a strength. You have to ask yourself in that moment, what have I gained over these last 4 years? In what ways have I grown as a person and dancer? And how am I going to use that to my advantage in this new situation? You know, so it's all so many things in dance, and finding your path and success in dance really is about your mindset and how you're viewing it, and how you're allowing yourself to focus on your strengths and capabilities.
Yeah, it's so true, because it is such a mental thing too. Like, we have to believe in ourselves. And so, yeah, I've heard that, like, oh, I'm going to be an older dancer now, maybe in this company, and these people are younger and have more, I don't know, facility. But you're right, like, there's pros and cons to all of it. And no matter what, it's about that mental part of you that has to keep on going. Because I think we learned in like our dance essential class, actually freshman year of college, that it's like 90% mental dances and 10% physical. So, you know, it's all very interesting.
Really do love that perspective, Jess. And I think I'm going to try to embody that a little bit more, because Hannah and I graduated in 2020, and then I chose to do a 1-year grad program outside of that. And so starting this year in a company environment, as someone who is now 23, I was definitely feeling that, well, I'm on the older end of, all the new people that were joining. And so, yeah, I really like that kind of perspective and of looking at it. So I definitely will try to utilize that a little bit more for myself.
Yeah. I mean, I've had clients who were like, the other people coming in were just like won these ballet competitions or like were chosen from these ballet competitions and things. And like with that, I was like, okay, there's a really practical thing we can look at here where when someone has this experience of dancing solos in a ballet competition, they're not going to be dancing solos in a company for probably a while. If you have had a lot of experience in college dancing in a corps de ballet, which I had a ton of that experience from my college years, that's what you need to be able to do when you first start in a company. So it's like there's a lot of things that you can bring there with you.
That's so true. And honestly, I don't mean this in a belittling way whatsoever, but those maybe younger dancers who, like you said, have won all these competitions and that's been like a focus for them, I think sometimes then have issues with kind of reining things back and being okay with fitting in with everyone as opposed to trying to be the one to stand out, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
a real skill
to both, for sure.
Yes.
Not saying that you shouldn't ever stand out or shine like that,
but it takes skill and learning to dance well in a corps. And if you're, like you said, if your experience has been just trying to get yourself to stand out in a way as a soloist, like it is going to be hard sometimes to pull it back.
Yeah. And so you mentioned that your degree involved a lot of business classes as well because of the arts administration. So have you found that to actually be quite beneficial to what you're doing, since it is kind of your own business? It's a little entrepreneurial, I guess you could say.
It was like I was pretty far removed by the time I started the whole dancer. I guess not that far. I had graduated 8 years prior, but with my goal of making it a primarily online and virtual business, that wasn't where the focus was in my arts admin degree. I would imagine that now at this point, hopefully most things are more focused on how are you going to build your business from a virtual presence standpoint. But at that time, it really wasn't a big focus. So I kind of had to delve into a whole new world of online business in order to establish some things. I would say there were some probably marketing and PR thoughts lingering from college, but a lot of it really was just like, okay, how do you build up this presence online?
That's totally fair. I could see how things have definitely shifted a lot, especially more so even in these last few years. But
right.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah. All right. So with that, we're going to take a short break and then we will be right back to learn more from Jess. Here's a word from our sponsor. All right, so as we continue, I want to ask Jess, a little bit more about your program and your one-on-one offerings. What do your clients expect from you? Do you have a certain way that you go about it, or is it kind of individualized per client?
So my main one-on-one coaching offering right now is Elite Best Body Coaching, and it's a 6-month program where we meet once a week for 6 months. And there is a structure that I follow within the framework of, what I've kind of developed as a process for helping dancers to find a balanced relationship to food in their bodies. And within that, also reach body goals in a healthy and sustainable way without being obsessive or restrictive or anything like that. Now, individual dancers will have things going on that kind of will adjust the schedule. And, sometimes it's around audition time, sometimes it's around busy performance times, like Nutcracker especially, and that will lead to conversation to strategize for making, eating in a way that feels best to you easier, and maintaining confidence amidst rejection in the time of auditions and things like that, or even casting. So I would say on top of what my plan is, what they have going on really does inform a lot of the direction that things take. It is, like I was saying, part of why dancers definitely need to explore different people as support options is because, and you girls were saying this as well, it's like we have ways of relating to one another that are different, or I have experiences that you may relate to. Having danced professionally has played a lot into the role that I play for the dancers that I work with, because I know what it's like to go through company audition stuff, and I know what it's like to feel super disappointed by casting in a professional show. And I know what it can feel like when you're questioning yourself as you pursue dance as a career. And so I bring that into it, and that kind of takes the frame of mentorship on top of what I do as a coach.
Really cool. Thank you.
Yeah, wonderful and so beneficial.
Yeah, I know. I'm listening to this, and it's like we need more people like you out there doing your thing. That's amazing. I think, as Kristen said, a lot of people could benefit from that. And it's just,
where was this when we were growing up?
Right. Yeah,
I mean, it was around, but we just didn't
I don't think it was. I mean, it really wasn't. And like I said, it's really just been more and more over the last few years. There are coaches and different support services coming up, and it's so needed. Like, I think every dancer needs to find someone to fill that role of potential coach and or mentor. And especially, the body image piece is big for so many dancers, and that relationship then to food, how that's impacted by how you view yourself, and how you view food in relationship to your dancing, because all too often we're taught that, well, you should not be eating X, Y, or Z, or you should be really cutting back on these things, or if you want to make it professionally, you should be eating this specific way or cutting out this thing. And it really doesn't serve us, and I was in a conversation with some Butler dance friends in this last week, and one of them was like, I eat so much more now than I did then, and I exercise so much less, and my body is so much more where I probably would have wanted it to be when I was pursuing dance professionally. And so often we have in our heads as dancers that when it comes to food, we should be eating less. When it comes to movement, we should be doing more. And when that doesn't yield this aesthetic that people are telling us is the ideal, then we really start to beat ourselves up and say, this is something that's wrong with me. And the reality is, it's the approach and it's the messaging. That's what's wrong. It's not you, and it's not your body. It's just the way you're looking at all of those things. And there's not enough of that message still in the dance world. It's like there's still tons and tons and tons of teachers and even professors at college dance programs who are not providing support people or resources that are going to actually help in those areas. And they're also perpetuating those old messages like, oh, you should cut out this thing, or you should cut out this food group, or scale back on this, and that's going to help you do what you want to do and achieve what you want to achieve.
Right. And I think part of the problem with that is, in a lot of these college dance programs, you need these certain credentials. You need to have had all of this professional experience in order to be a full-time professor and have that status. And while they may have so many wonderful experiences and so much knowledge in the field, like you said, they are stuck in sometimes this is not a full generalization, but stuck in those old school ways, because that's how they grew up dancing and training. That's what their teachers told them. And they never experienced or went through, something like your program, whereas that's becoming maybe a little bit more normalized within the dance world and trying to break some of the stigmas and stereotypes, whereas that just was not part of their training and their experience. So they're just passing on what they were told and what they kind of have over time believed to be the right thing. But unfortunately, not
There's
always.
a lot of that. Yeah. And, you know, it's this mentality that they bring with them where they've convinced themselves that, well, it's been working. Like our students are going on and like, and this is for pre-professional training programs as well. Like, well, our students are going and getting professional jobs. So what we're doing is still working. But it is like, where's the sustainability in what they're doing? Are your dancers happy when they get there? Are they able to sustain and maintain their careers? Are they fueling themselves adequately and healthfully? Like all of these other questions just need to be asked, because, you know, when you look back generations and generations ago, there's been a lot of mental health struggle, but just has never been addressed as much as it's starting to be at least talked about and looked at a little bit more in the last handful of years.
Right. And yeah, I love what you said about just, you know, kind of looking more at the full picture in addressing the human in us all, and not just the dancer, the person in the leotard and tights in class that the teacher is focusing on, but also what they feel and all of that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what we just talked about prior to going on our podcast today is a teacher that Jess and I both have. I currently have, and she had. And that person just does such a good job really getting to know each person, and will ask for your name. And it doesn't feel like you're just a number or one of many people in the room. So if we can have more teachers like her, and we can kind of change the face of dance over time, I think that could be overall just very healthy and, you know, just a much healthier and happier approach to dancing. It'll make more people stay in it, I feel like.
Yeah, it's part of the old school mentality that really needs to be reconsidered, is this idea that if you're just encouraging, people are not going to succeed. Like you have to, like there's this thought process that people have to develop a thicker skin. They have to be tougher. They have to be able to take a level of abuse, perhaps, in order to make it in dance. But fear and intimidation are not, in fact, the best motivators. And encouragement and, you know, allowing people to see their own gifts and value, those things really are. Those are the things that allow people to reach the next level and believe that they can do it, and believe that they can get a professional job and keep it. You know, there has to be this reconsideration of what we do in the classroom, especially. And I would say, like, kind of what part of my role as well is to be that person for dancers outside of the studio, so that they can go in and sort of like block out the mental harm that might be done to them, and say, no, like this person is saying this thing for X, Y, or Z reason, or they're bringing their own skewed experience or their own damaged experience to it. I have to be my own motivator, and I have to be the person who consistently reinforces that I can do it and I can make it and it is possible. And so like dancers can build some of that resilience on their own, but definitely we need to have a world in dance where the teachers and professors are seeing that they have to bring that as well, and how much better it will be when they bring that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think if we all get on board with it, things are going to change in a positive way. So,
definitely.
Yeah.
It has to be a kind of team effort in a sense.
Yeah.
So going back to just talk about nutrition a little bit, while I definitely acknowledge like everybody is different and requires different things, but do you just have any general like favorite snack ideas that you like to recommend to dancers just to help them like feel good, whether it's like between class and rehearsal or just like a day that they're being very active?
I mean, I'm all about things that are easy, especially because dancer schedules tend to need that. So I think you can absolutely incorporate things like packaged protein bars, and, you know, they have those different hummus and veggie, or hummus and pita chip or pita bread snacks, like those kinds of things can and should absolutely be incorporated. Nuts and trail mix are super easy to bring, fruit and nut butter as well. I always tell dancers who are traveling, especially for things like auditions, to bring packets of oatmeal, because then you can just go to a coffee shop and ask for a cup of hot water. And that's good airport food without having to like search the airport for something that feels good to you. But also that's something that you can like have in your hotel room or have before an audition, like, you know, just very easy. And don't limit yourself. If you're in a pinch and the option is to eat nothing or to eat something that you might consider less than ideal, get the thing that you need to eat in order to fuel what you're about to do. Because again, that's a little bit of the mentality, like, well, if there's not something here that I think is the best fuel or the best option, I should just eat nothing. And in most cases, you will be better served by eating something.
Yeah, I don't want to get injured. That wouldn't be
good. Yeah, and that connection is not made often enough either, but underfueling leads to injury. And, you know, dancers really have to be taught that from a young age. Like, you have to eat enough and you have to eat a lot for the amount of activity that most dancers are doing.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Well, kind of our last question to wrap things up today. While we don't like suggest putting your work out of business by any means, just what are your thoughts on integrating this type of program or kind of what you do into pre-existing dance programs and training, or do you see itself as being more beneficial as its own kind of external entity?
I think it should be available on a larger scale. And in a lot of ways, that would be really useful to be integrated into pre-professional training programs and especially college dance programs. There should be a wellness, a dancer wellness person on all school and college campus staff. And their role really should be advocating for the health and wellness of the dancers and making sure that that's at the forefront of the minds of teachers and professors as well. I believe that has to be the next wave of things. And the sooner that is embraced and taken on, I think the schools that start to do it first are going to be way ahead of the game and are going to be viewed, at least by parents, who certainly have a lot of power in this and opinion and influence in where their dancers might end up. They should be viewed as the best options, because if a school is taking that kind of initiative and being that proactive, I think that says something big about what they value and what they see as important, because it's saying that the number one thing for us is the health of our dancers and their well-being. And ultimately, you know, the connection that I would always make for people in those roles at schools and training programs is that you are going to have more successful dancers because they have a more balanced mindset around these things. Like, bringing in this stuff is not going to lead to anything that will be detrimental to your dancers. It's not going to hold them back from succeeding. To the contrary, it's going to allow them to succeed and go further in many cases than they otherwise might have been able to go. You know, that's something I sometimes will share about my own story, is like, I think I had a lot of potential to go to dance other places, to go further, to maintain a career for longer than I did. But having been in that struggling place for so long, it just wasn't going to happen. If it was approached in a different way, if I was able to find that balance with my body earlier, I could have had a much different career. And I think that that's true for a lot of dancers. And even now, it's like, dancers can go what is the true potential of some of these dancers? We're not going to be able to see it if we don't support them in these other areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Do you ever see yourself like wanting to go to a college dance program, if they like offered maybe a seminar, like would you be interested in that? Like bring your work to college campuses if you were able to, or even
100%. Yeah, definitely. And I think even, part of it is that I can speak at pre-professional training programs, and I've spoken at different schools and things. The college dance environment, though, is one that obviously I'm most intimately connected to because that was my experience. And so I can speak to what goes on as far as, struggle of balancing academics and dance classes and what it's like to deal with that kind of schedule, and even what you're going to face coming out of that. I think that oftentimes with, professors being somewhat further removed from their professional experience, they don't always have enough or a large enough wealth of information to share with dancers who are going to be embarking on that. And for me, it's like, yes, I didn't dance. I'm a little bit far removed from my own professional dancing. However, my clients have kept me very connected to what goes on in auditions and, trainee programs at different companies and, different facets of getting started in professional dance. That does allow me to have information that I can share with college dancers specifically, and what's coming next for them.
Yeah. And would you say your clients right now are all kind of in that stage of life, like embarking on a professional career? Or I know you said you see a mix of people, but is that generally who you're seeing?
Yeah, it's mostly pre-professional and professional. I do work with a lot of dancers in college dance programs, again, because I'm very connected to that experience. And then sometimes, or oftentimes actually, it will be dancers in transition, like coming back from an injury, or in those years where it's like I'm getting ready to audition for either like a higher level pre-professional program or for companies. So I do see a lot of that dancers in transition.
Cool.
So for people who may be hearing this and are interested in following you closer and the work you do, where should they find you?
Yeah, so the best place I think to start is thewholedancer.com, where I have, a free resources tab, and you can sign up for one of my free guides. And then I've been all up on the Instagram lately. So I would say Instagram as well. It's at The Whole Dancer.
Yeah. So everyone, please check Jess out. It's been a pleasure having you today. We're so happy for this time that we shared together. And
it's great to connect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, thank you so much again, Jess.
Thank you, girls, very much.
Thanks for tuning into Abundance. We appreciate your support. We hope to have PK'd your interest. Feel free to contact us at abundancepodcast5678@gmail.com and give us feedback on what you'd like to hear. That is Abundance without parentheses. Go dance yourself silly. Bye for now.
A special thank you to Richard DiFiore for our lovely podcast tune and Matt Mellish for our cover art.